There is no cure, no treatment plan, no second opinion. Being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. This is the Volatile Podcast by the common fan for the common fan. I'm Mac Williams, and I'm here with my good friends, Nick Duncan and Joe Davis. Joe, how are we doing tonight, man?
Oh, fired up, ready to talk about some surprising turn of events this week in volunteer athletics. Doing great.
Great.
That was a very Bob Kessling intro there. Turn of events.
Like that? Like that?
Wait, we dig Bob Kessling now? Since when?
No, we don't. I was throwing shade.
Okay.
I was trying to think when it's not like the most excited I've ever been as a Vol fan, but I'm about as excited probably as right before Max Gilbert missed that field goal against Georgia.
God.
I think that's probably the last time I was excited about Tennessee sports as I am right now.
Okay. And with that, we will. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah. Oh, geez.
So
okay.
it's terrible, but I don't know. The chemo's working a little bit. I feel like the tumor shrunk just a smidge.
Yeah. Radiation is healing. All right. So, latest news. Listen, we're going to get started tonight with some latest news. Spring practice has brought plenty of drama this week. I will confess from the beginning, I'm not really on social media at all. So I'm not on X. I don't see all these things, but I've listened to at length what's gone on. So let's just jump right into the two videos that are circulated around that are catching a lot of drama right now. The first one, let's talk about David Sanders. So did either of you watch the video?
Yes, I did not see the Tristan Keys video that I think we will discuss later, but I have seen David Sanders.
Joe, have you watched the video? Okay.
I've seen neither. I will just be cold.
Okay. So the David Sanders video, I'm going to explain it. Nick, you correct any details that are wrong.
Sure.
David Sanders' video essentially has him lining up against a defensive tackle of some kind. I don't know who it was, but he essentially in the video just absolutely destroys this guy and puts him flat on his back, drives him to the ground, yada, yada. Very exciting play, gets up, it's very hype. Very fun video to watch. Looks like the guys are playing hard, having a good time. But it caused a lot of drama because from certain people on X, I don't know which accounts, I don't know who is critiquing this. I heard former players. I don't know which ones. But essentially, the video, the critique that they have is that David Sanders is using poor technique and is likely holding, even though he's clearly winning this battle at the line of scrimmage. So, Nick, go ahead and touch up any details that I missed or misrepresented.
No, that's fair. He absolutely just manhandles. I can't remember who it is. I was actually trying to look up. It's 88. I don't know. It's practice, spring practice. All I heard in reference on the podcast was a Division I athlete, and I can't tell from the video who it is. But he does manhandle him. He's got his arms kind of wrapped around him a little bit. It definitely could be called a hold. I've seen way worse from Alabama and Georgia that's never been called a hold. So I feel like the reaction was a little overblown. I mean, it's obviously a point of emphasis, I guess, to be more violent on the offensive and defensive lines, and I think that's why it was shared. But I mean, he throws that boy to the ground, whether it was legal or not. He manhandles him and kind of mauls him. So I thought it was a pretty cool video. But
yeah, so on VolQuest, I believe it was, or it might have been 247 because I believe that Patrick Brown
posted it.
Yes, yeah. Patrick Brown was the original poster of this video. And essentially, I guess Patrick Brown posted the video because, he thought it was a cool video. And also because apparently, I guess David Sanders was either asked about it or said off camera or in an interview or something that he was making the play in that manner in order to set a more aggressive physical tone for spring practice. So that's kind of what he's quoted as saying is he was just trying to set the tone. He wasn't trying to, have perfect technique and run some drill where, he's getting perfect hand placement or perfect footwork or yada, yada, yada. It was just more of a, hey, let's get after it and let's hit each other today kind of thing.
Yep.
So given that, Joe, you've got the background, all the things. What do you think about that? You think people are clutching their pearls too much over this, or do you feel like, yeah, we should have good technique even in practice? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the old adage is true. You practice makes permanent, right? It doesn't make perfect; it makes permanent. So I guess there's some fairness to that. But my gosh, it's a spring practice, people. Like, if he's trying to set a tone and kind of affect the culture, those sound like real big positives to me. And I'm assuming this is like a 15 or 30-second video clip.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, like 20 seconds.
I mean, 20. Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, is that indicative of like the entire offensive lines, or even just Sanders in particular, his skill, his technique, his form, all those things? Like, I think everybody's clutching their pearls too much.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that way to me as someone who hasn't seen the video, but I've only heard, like 5 different people talk about it. It seems like, unfortunately, what it led me to think was, maybe modern day coaches are right by just never allowing media anywhere near their practices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of grew some sympathy for me for Josh Heupel and maybe even David Sanders a little bit. Like, I think that players and coaches should just stay off social media as much as possible. I'm not saying they can't have accounts or whatever, but like, that like you're going to catch criticism no matter what you do from some margin of the fan base. I actually think the whole like, Tennessee fans specifically, but fans across the country, I think the whole like these fans are crazy and they're like verbally abusing the athletes. I think that's really overblown. I think that's just a narrative that's being pushed. I don't actually think it's that bad, but obviously, let's say, you have 100% of Tennessee fans across the world. There probably is 5 to 10% of the fans who are absolutely horribly, they use horrible language directed at young players and coaches. And no matter what you do, they're always going to have a problem. So like, but are we really going to let the 5-10% of people out there like dictate how we feel about ourselves? Like, that's where I don't have much sympathy for the student athlete. It's like, come on, man. Like, you're playing at a big time school a lot of people would love to play at. You're making money now to play. Like, just deal with the flack and let it roll off your back. Like, who really cares? Like, it's just not that big of a deal. But at the same time, it's like, now I see why they don't want these media people around, because even when you post something that's intended to be harmless, like, hey, look at this cool play David Sanders made, it's like, well, now it's a big argument online,
Yeah. I think I listened to that VolQuest podcast I think you're referencing as well this week. And the one thing that Brent Hubb said that I was like, I think that might be the most persuasive take I've heard on like media access is like, he was like, I would totally just turn my phone in, like when I go into the practice facility, if they would just let me watch more practice. And that way, like, then media could come out, they could write stories, they could talk about on podcasts, they could even like be told specifically, like, you can talk about the way the players are playing, but like you can't talk about scheme and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And have some kind of agreement like that where we actually hear a little more. And then there's just no clips, like, because no one has phones or anything like that. Yeah. So I think that sounds like a better arrangement than the current arrangement. And you never know what's going on in practice. Like, what's the point of the drill? Like, maybe they told those guys, like, this is just right. This is just a drill where we're not super concerned about, technique. We just want you guys to be hitting each other. Like, I don't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, as someone who, grew up playing football, and so, I'm sure you played your fair share of, pickup games and whatnot as well. Like, as someone who played football, like, when you did Oklahoma drills back in the day, like, your coaches weren't sitting there critiquing your technique. Yeah, like, bro. It was just, hey, knock the crap out of people and let's see who's the toughest guy out here.
You know, like, toughen up. The point of this drill is to toughen up. It's like, it's like running sprints in basketball. Like, you're never going to do that in a game. Like, you're never going to be like, I'm going to run a sprint during the basketball game. It's to build a specific skill of endurance. And some football drills are the same way. Like, this isn't about holding or anything like that. This is about being tough. This is about getting hard because you're going to get hit this season. And so I think it's just way overblown. I thought it was a cool clip. I'd be fine if we never saw clips from spring practice ever again, if we could get more actual info from the media guys about what's going on. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's spring practice, right? Like, everybody probably just needs to take a chill pill and relax a little bit. Like, let the guys figure it out, hit each other, And honestly, like, we need to be tough. We need the tenacity.
Yeah.
This is SEC football we're talking about. These guys need to go from boys to men. Like, let's go. I'm all for it.
Especially when, like, I mean, we don't have to spend too much more time on this, but like, especially when you've got new young quarterbacks coming in, they need to be protected. Like, that offensive line better get their butt ready, because if they have any kind of success this year, it's going to be because they give those guys time to figure it out. So they need to be tough. They need to be hard. They need to get hit, and a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we need our offensive line to play nasty. Like, the reason why Trey Smith is such a beloved player in Vol history as an offensive lineman. I mean, is there an offensive lineman that's more loved than Trey Smith, honestly, all time? I mean, like, if you go line on both sides, obviously Reggie White, but like Trey Smith is probably the most household beloved name as an offensive lineman in Tennessee football history. And the reason Trey Smith is so good is not because he has the best technique. It's because he's absolutely nasty. Like, he plays with a grit and a tenacity and a nastiness that, like, other guys just don't have, And it's spring. Like, if you're not going to work on you can't do it in the fall, you're going to get people hurt. Right. So, like, now is the time to do it and to develop that tenacity on your offensive line and have those guys playing that way. I'm for it. I like it. So
I like it too.
I dig it.
Yep. So the second video, Tristan TK. I guess he's going by TK. He's listed at the roster as TK. But Tristan Keys, TK Keys. So in this video, I'm a little more fuzzy on the details because I didn't see it. But essentially, the main thing to glean from this is that apparently he wasn't going 100%. Right. That's the bottom line. I guess he's running a route and he's not going 100%. Nick, can you fill in? Like, was he running again? Was there a defensive back matchup against him? Was this routes on air? Like, what was this?
Man, sorry. I think I might have said this earlier, but I did not see this one.
Oh, okay. I probably just forgot that.
I've heard about it. I didn't see it. I've heard the debate basically center around what we just said before, which is like, anyone who's played football knows that there are route drills where you're even told, don't go 100% because we're working on this specific thing, right? Like, we're just working on learning the routes. We're allowing our quarterbacks to get familiar with the routes. So don't blow out of there 100%. Like, we're just going through the routes. So I don't know. Maybe he was just lollygagging, or maybe it was, some kind of drill where they weren't supposed to be going 100%. My whole thing again is just like, is spring practice, and I don't want to make excuses for him if he's lollygagging, if he's legitimately lollygagging, but like, we just don't have enough context from any of these clips to feel this strongly one way or the other about it, in my opinion. Like, we're talking about 4 to 15-second clips, something like that. Most of these clips, it's insane for people to get this worked up, in my opinion, about like the 10 seconds of the 4-hour practice that they saw. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, I agree with everything Nick's saying, and there's a lot of context that we don't have. There's a lot of things we don't know, but also, I would be for a healthy social pressure. If he really is not given 100% when he's supposed to be, it's good for him to feel a social pressure from the media to be like, that's not acceptable. Right. Like, I'm okay with that. This goes back to what you were saying, Mac, about like, I think a lot of the abusive, toxic fan base and some of those narratives are kind of overblown. I would want him to feel that. So I would be for a little social pressure if his name's getting spread around social media and being like, he needs to do better if he actually does. I'm just not willing to be one of those people yet because I don't know. And it's spring practice. There's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of new. We got new quarterbacks, right? So that's got to be a significant factor. I have a hard time thinking that our coaching staff would just let guys just be. I mean, if he was doing that for 4, like, that's what I guess what I'm saying is, you got a 10-second clip, right, or a 15-second clip. I have a hard time thinking. I've been down on our coaching staff at times. I have a hard time thinking our coaching staff would let a guy do that for 4 hours. I just don't believe that. So.
Yeah. So I'm actually scrolling through, and I think I have found the clip. There's a few clips of Tristan Keys catching the ball. This one's from Faison Brandon on an out route that Ben McKee posted, and people are going pretty hard on it. So this may be the one in question, and it just doesn't look like a big deal to me. I don't know. I would expect him to be faster than this if he's supposed to be going full speed. But like, the things that I've seen are like, he's obviously slow. He's a bust. And it's like, bro, it's his second practice.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Yeah. And look, like, I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate here for a second. Like, I agree that, the fans are probably making a lot out of nothing, or what could be nothing. But at the same time, like, I don't want to tell people how to fan. Like, if you care that much about Tennessee football, you and I would probably be friends. So, like, if you're getting worked up over something at spring practice, you and I probably have a lot of good stuff to talk about. So I respect that people are like this, that they care this much this early on. So I want to start with that just by saying, like, I get it. Like, I totally get it. And you have this, this terminal diagnosis. You have this feeling in the back of your mind, like, why does it seem like all the 5-star players we get are just never as good as the other 5-star players that everybody else gets? So I'm sympathetic to all of that. I really am.
Yep, totally.
And so that, all that being said, I'm also like, I have to think about my childhood, right? My childhood was spent watching guys like Allen Iverson be one of the best players in basketball for many years, who infamously is known for saying, practice? We're not talking about the game. We're talking about practice. Right? When you're a 5-star guy that's elite, and I mean like elite, I've been around some great athletes, and they never work as hard as the guys who are more mediocre when it comes to athleticism, because they don't have to. They just don't have to. And like it or lump it, like, if Tristan Keys really is as good as he's advertised, it's not surprising to me that he slacks off a little bit at practice.
Sure.
It's just not surprising to me because that's what those guys tend to do.
And
now,
that's that's not what I would want him to do. No. But like, Johnny Football is famously, like, if anyone's seen the Netflix documentary on Johnny Football, like, dude's just, I mean, he's like the Dennis Rodman of college football. He's just like gone all week on a bender, shows up on Friday or Thursday, goes through walkthroughs, and then beats Alabama on Saturday.
Yeah.
Like, some dudes are just gamers. Like, Hendon Hooker and Josh Dobbs were both kind of notoriously called like gamers because they just looked pedestrian in practice, but then they showed up and got it done, Yep. So like, all I will say is I totally agree. I appreciate people's passion. My thing is, like, I guess I wish we wouldn't that the passion wouldn't determine what we already like. We're already like saying he's definitely a bust. I mean, battered Vol syndrome, super possible, wouldn't shock me. But like 1 10-second clip on the second practice, I'm just kind of like, it's a little concerning, but like I'm willing to wait and see. But I would expect him to look better than he does on this video. So.
Sure, absolutely. No,
I
agree.
would just say, like, it's concerning, but like we don't have to draw a conclusion about him yet.
100%.
So yeah.
I mean,
nation's the best, baby, because we're like, it's day 2 of spring practice. Why y'all look like crap? You guys suck.
yeah, I love it. I mean, I love it. I'm not gonna.
People see that route and they're like, we're a 4-8 football team. We're a 4-10, whatever, 4-8 football team.
One of my best friends in the entire world is the most negative Tennessee fan I know, and I love him to death. I wish he could be here with us tonight. But like, if I let the negativity of Tennessee fans bother me, I couldn't be friends with Jeff anymore. Like, it just wouldn't be possible.
Hey, Chief's probably going to listen to this, but I couldn't be. He's my dad. I could never talk to him about Tennessee football. I remember we'd be sitting watching football, and we'd go down 7-0. There's 3 3/4 of quarters left to play, and he'd be like, "We're horrible. There's no chance we're winning this game. We're horrible." I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, it's one drive." Like, I love it because he loves them so much that he hates any time like anyone scores. Right? Like, and I dig it. It's good.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I think the Volatile Podcast takeaway here is that we don't care. Just win, baby. Just win.
That's right. Just win.
Right. So, all right, latest news. Tennessee basketball is Sweet 16 bound for the 4th season in a row. We will face Iowa State on Friday night at 9:10 p.m. That's Central Time on TBS. We'll get into basketball later. But, guys, I mean, wow. I mean, this basketball team is doing it. Hey. So, I don't want to – yeah, I mean –
We're dancing.
I mean –
3 straight hits. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean I was looking earlier at the list of teams that have gone to at least 4 straight Sweet 16s, and there's a lot. It's not like it's a short list. It's maybe about 20, 25 teams.
Sure.
But you're on a list of teams that are like traditional blue bloods, other than like some random teams who have had like one off where they had really good teams, and most of them, believe it or not, except for the current powerhouse teams, are like teams that clearly would have had like one elite player that was there for 4 years back when players did that, and so they went to the Sweet 16 for 4 years because they had one of the better players in college basketball, and that's why they went. But the fact that Tennessee is doing it now in this era when they're clearly not a blue blood basketball school, but obviously Rick Barnes is a great coach, I think is really impressive for the resources that we have and what we're doing. So we'll get into more of that later, but I just wanted to, that's awesome. I mean, I'm excited.
We play at 9:10 p.m. Central.
Yes.
What time do Vandy and Kentucky and Florida play?
No.
See, you did there. That's funny. That's funny. They do not play. Auburn does play though in the NIT. So.
Yeah. Make sure to tune into that. ESPN 8, the Ocho.
That's right.
If it's almost a sport.
Oh man, that's a good one, Nick. That was good. You got me. I was like trying to think like when do they play? Yeah, they don't. Oh man. And the last bit of latest news here is that Tennessee baseball wins their series versus Mizzou last weekend, and we also beat SC Upstate in the midweek game. So we'll talk about baseball here in a minute, but let's go straight into basketball. Let's ride the high we got here. So in round one, Tennessee beats Miami of Ohio 78-56, 22-point victory for the Vols in round one. And then Virginia, we beat them 79-72 in the round of 32. So first thing, I want to talk about just some general kind of stuff here. The first thing is, y'all have probably seen this already, but Tennessee is the first team in NCAA basketball tournament history that's beaten two 30-win teams back-to-back in the tournament. Did y'all see this?
I did, yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy.
And Iowa State's got 29.
Yeah, and obviously, like –
yeah, sure.
Like, what does that really mean? I mean, Miami of Ohio, like, you should beat them anyways. Doesn't really matter. Virginia having 30 wins is, of course, impressive. They play in the ACC, but
they've won a national championship in recent years. So
yeah, so
I mean, that's a good program.
I think more than anything, it's just a cool stat, to know that Tennessee's done that. But the biggest thing I think coming out of the first weekend, stat-wise, so I just want to start here, is Jacoby Gillespie. Obviously, dude has had a great first weekend in the NCAA tournament, had a great tournament last year, hoping it continues in the Elite Eight. But I wanted to go ahead and say, stat-wise, while we're on that subject, Jacoby Gillespie became the third player in NCAA tournament history, to record 50 points and 15 assists through the first two games of the tournament. The other two were Kemba Walker and Billy Donovan, which are obviously two iconic college basketball names.
Pretty good list.
So, guys, let's talk about Jacoby. Nick, what were your biggest takeaways about Jacoby in week one?
That I was completely wrong about him. I mean, happy to eat this crow. When he played so good against Miami of Ohio, I was like, well, we can expect him to score 10 points and turn the ball over about 8 times in the next game. And dude showed up, man. I mean, hit shots. Maybe he's listening to the podcast and using me for motivation. If so, Jacoby, there's no chance you'll do it 3 games in a row. You suck. So
we've seen your practice videos, Jacoby. We know you don't hustle.
We know you don't care about practice. Guy just loafs through the whole season waiting for the NCAA tournament.
Golly. Joe, what did you think about Jacoby coming out of the first weekend?
I mean, it's obviously the high is hard to describe, right? I mean, just totally out of nowhere. But it does beg the question, where has this been, all season? But I think it was you, Mac, and maybe it was one of our other guys in the chat, but somebody had said, maybe – Jacoby played really good in the tournament last year. Is that right? Am I thinking about that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
And so maybe he's just a tournament. Like maybe this is just how he's wired. Like, yeah, just get me into the room and I'll take it from there. And if that's the case, then so be it. But I'm glad he's playing for us and he's not playing for somebody else, because he was absolutely electric.
It was wild. It was like he knew, like, hey, Nate's hurt. Nate's not 100%. He's not explosive. And I mean, if he is this self-aware, because I am aware as a fan, obviously watching, that like if Nate or Jacoby don't have big nights, we probably don't win a basketball game. right? Like one of those two guys kind of has to go off and score, 20 to 30 points. And it's like he knows that. It's like he knows, like, I got to pick my team up. Like, it's my team right now. Like, Nate's down, and hopefully he gets more healthy every day. But like, they need me right now, and I mean, he's just been locked in. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. While we're talking about players, talk about these two games. I mean, the Miami Ohio game was kind of obviously Jacoby was the standout, but it was kind of an all hands on deck game. I mean, Tennessee just showed they are better than that team in every way, and it just was never really even felt like a game that I was worried about. I was worried before the game, but once the game started, it just felt like we were the better team the entire time, and Tennessee took care of business. So I was glad. Focusing more on the Virginia game, because obviously that's a better quality opponent, a much closer game. A couple more guys that stood out to me, and I want to hear you guys, what do you think about these two guys and how they performed specifically, but were Bishop Boswell and JP Estrella. Those two guys seemed to play really, really well against Virginia. So, Nick, take one of those guys and talk about what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, with JP, it just feels like he's got a lot of confidence. I mean, I just feel like our bigs generally, but particularly JP, have a lot of confidence right now. And I don't know if that has something to do with the fact that we're the best offensive rebounding team in the league. So, like, hopefully Rick has told them, like, hit a shot, because your buddy's gonna grab a board if you, like, they got your back. I mean, it's basically every other shot they miss, they bring down. And so, so I don't know what it is, but man, he hit some great shots. He's got that hook working from a pretty good distance. Like, it's not like he's right under the basket when he's hitting some of those little hook shots. And, and just generally, this goes a little bit outside JP, but like JP and Okpara and Carey in this aspect, I don't want to get off on a whole Carey thing like we always do, but their ability to find each other and pass the ball inside as bigs is remarkable. I mean, they just all see the floor well. So it's just, really impressed with JP.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on Bishop, Joe?
Yeah, I actually had Bishop as the unsung hero of the weekend in my notes, because JG is going to get all of the accolades because he just was absolutely electric, and he should. That's right. But Bishop Boswell, I think, he's the guy that he doesn't have like the numbers, but again, stats tell a part of the story, but moments tell the other part of the story. And Bishop Boswell, to me, was the standout sort of supporting cast player that Tennessee could go to in key moments, and he was equal to the task. Hit a couple of big threes in the Virginia game, and obviously he's kind of known for his defensive capabilities. I mean, the guy is a really good defender, but he's shown himself to be a real kind of third look offensive threat. And so I actually had Bishop Boswell as like, Jacoby Gillespie's going to get all the accolades, but I actually think Bishop Boswell, because excuse me, we've had high expectations for Jacoby, and it just seems like he's finally meeting them, which is great. But it is an expectation that we should have for a player of that caliber, and it's great that he's finally meeting it. I thought Bishop Boswell was really the standout of, like, I didn't expect this guy to be draining threes when we need him in tight moments, and he was hitting them. So he was actually my standout player. I'll throw one more thing in the hopper that I think Tennessee fans can be excited about, which is it seems to me like Ament was actually starting to find his groove towards the end of the Virginia game. He was a non-factor in the first half, but he started to kind of pick up his offensive play. Obviously, he had that incredible block, another big key moment.
Shoot, that was nasty, bro.
That was sweet. That was sweet.
We got some emotion out of Nate on that.
That actually kind of felt like a turning point for him. Like he smacked that ball down, and it took him still a little while to get his offensive production going. But he started to get some good looks, drive to the basket. He was drawing fouls. He was hitting his free throws. Generally, he missed. But anyway, I guess what I told Nick right after the game was, if Jacoby Gillespie continues to play at this high level that he's currently playing at, if Nate Ament is starting to find his stride, and Bishop Boswell is always like a third threat from the 3-point line, with the bigs that we have that have been playing incredible all season,
Can beat anybody.
Who can Tennessee not beat at this point? And the answer to me is, they can beat anybody. The question is, can they just consistently produce at this level for the rest of the tournament? We'll see.
Sure.
But I think it's really good news that Nate Ament was starting to kind of find his stride. I don't think he's 100%. I didn't, when I was watching the end of the game, I wasn't like, oh, Nate's back, but it felt like he was kind of getting back into it. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's hard because Nate clearly is not 100%. He's clearly not playing to the level that he had been playing. But I think you're right, Joe, in that it seems like if he can just focus on doing the little things, playing good defenses on the floor, being active in offense, and driving the ball and getting fouled, like taking those mid-range jump shots and drawing fouls, that I think is where he can best serve this team moving forwards for however many games we have left. And if he can just be consistent at the free throw line, I think that's enough. If you get Jacoby shooting well, if you get support from guys like Bishop Boswell, and if Carey can hit some shots, if JP can stay hot around the rim, stuff like that,
Felix,
I think that's gonna be enough to beat a team like Iowa State. But you need Nate to be knocking down those free throws and doing what he can do within whatever percentage of his playing ability he has left in the tank.
He's still a big enough threat, and this is another thing about Bishop, to Joe's point, like when you have guys that can knock down shots, like if you leave Bishop open, he can knock down a shot. JP can knock down a shot. Nate, even at whatever he's at, 70, 75%, can knock down shots. Like if they can knock down enough shots and they have to respect everybody, then that gives Jacoby opportunity to keep doing what he's been doing, because they can't just take him out of the game. If those guys aren't hitting shots, then they can just remove Jacoby from the game and you're kind of cooked. But they've been playing team basketball the last couple games. So,
yeah. Well, Nick, go ahead, Joe.
Some negatives, and I don't have a ton of negatives, but I thought Estrella getting into foul trouble early was, it seemed bonehead to me. He's too integral of a piece, especially when you're playing a team. Because you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was watching Virginia, basically my impression of Virginia, who I've not watched all year, was that they were just like a more talented version of Miami of Ohio, that they play very similar styles of basketball, but Virginia's just a much better team. And so with that in mind, I thought, Estrella is the guy that you want to have on the floor when you're playing a team that shoots a high percentage of threes and is not really driving down low, because he's better defending the 3-point line when he has to than a guy like Jalen Carey, who did great. I'm not trying to dog on him.
No, but that's definitely true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so he got into foul trouble early and he had to come out of the game. It ended up not costing Tennessee the game. And honestly, they really handled Virginia without him, because Virginia didn't really claw their way back until the end. So they did that, but it's just that kind of like, those are the kinds of things, the little things that can really change the momentum of a game and could lose you now that you're in the dance, now that you're 16 and up. I mean, you got to be playing smart, fast, quick, good basketball. So
yeah, and that second foul was really stupid. I mean, Rick Barnes was pretty mad. Mad. I mean, the second foul was terrible. So yeah, JP's got to not do stupid stuff like that, and that goes for any of the Jalen Carey, Felix Okpara. We need all those guys to not be. I'm okay. If you're playing down low against a big guy, and you get a foul when you're trying to defend a shot down there. But his second foul was like off the ball, just like hand fighting, like super stupid. And you just can't have that in these big games, especially against a team like Iowa State.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. So, Nick, you talked earlier about eating crow about Jacoby. I want to know, is there crow to be eaten regarding your take on this team is, quote, cooked because Cade Phillips is hurt? Is there crow to be eaten? Do you think that this team is, in fact, cooked without Cade Phillips?
I need to think about this. No.
Yeah. They never were, my friend. They never were.
Oh gosh.
He would have given us better minutes than Jalen Carey this year.
Yeah, let's go.
That's probably true. Based on Carey's production offensively, that's probably true. I think I can sign off on that. Yeah, I think
All
that's
right.
true.
I think it would have been more the case. I think Bishop Boswell kind of became the glue guy, whereas I feel like Cade was a glue guy. So I feel like we lost our glue. I feel like that was a lot of our problem early on, but I feel like Bishop grew into it. So this team has more grit than I gave them credit for.
Yeah, that's true. And hats off to Virginia as well. Just they had a lot of opportunities to just lay down and die, and they just every time they needed it, they hit a three that would just kind of jump them right back into the game. But I think that's even a testament to this team, like you just said, Nick, that they just had to keep coming back, right? Like they couldn't throw it in neutral and coast. And they fought to the end. It's so refreshing to be a Tennessee fan and just watch a team that doesn't just quit when real adversity comes. And I feel like that's in Tennessee athletics generally, that's always a problem for us when we get into a lead, when we get into a position where it's like, okay, we've got this game, and then we hit some adversity, they just fold. They fold like cheap tents. And this team proved in the Virginia game that they at least have it in themselves not to do that. I think that's a massive thing to be excited about going into Sweet 16.
I agree. It's a thing to be excited about. I think I need to diverge from your wording there. You said across Tennessee athletics, that you think that's a problem, that we fold when we get a lead and teams like clawing back, fighting back. I think that's true in football. Do you think that's true in baseball and basketball as well, Joe?
I haven't watched enough basketball to say like it's definitely true in basketball, but like at this season, I mean, we had Kentucky dead to rights 2 times in the year.
Yeah, this season, I think that's definitely been true.
I feel like it's been true in basketball this season. Whether that's true of basketball generally, I couldn't say because honestly, I've watched more basketball this year than I have if you took the rest of my life and put it all together. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Joe Davis, certified basketball lover.
That's right. That's right. So in baseball, baseball we've always kind of had a swagger, so it's probably unfair to put that. It's probably unfair to put that on baseball.
But to your point, though, baseball also this year has kind of struggled in close games and things like that. So I think it's definitely a pattern in.
It may be a recent trend.
Yeah, 2025, 2026 school year. Yeah. That's been a recent trend. I agree. But I have a hard time saying like baseball has been in so many games where it's like, well, we're going to lose. And then they just fight their way out.
Score 5 runs in the 8th.
Yeah. And I was going to say basketball too, under Rick Barnes as a whole in total, I would say there's been good years, there's been bad years, underachieving years, overachieving years. But I would say generally what I feel like about our basketball teams is that they play hard.
Yeah.
I'm definitely willing to concede the basketball point, and I'm glad you corrected the baseball point because I've actually never really thought that about our baseball program.
But no lead is safe in Tennessee football.
That's right. No lead is safe.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, guys, I want to ask a question before we get into Iowa State specifically. Staying on basketball, no matter what happens on Friday night, is what this team has accomplished so far this season a success for the 2025-2026 basketball team? Yes or no? Elaborate. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I've thought about this a bit. Definitely coming into the season, I would have thought this team was good enough to be a top 10 team. And so I would have expected them to be competing for an Elite Eight and probably making an Elite Eight, although it's a big ask for someone to do that 3 years in a row. With the way the season's played out, for sure, I think that this season is a success. I guess it's always about how you finish. If they go get beat by Iowa State the way Kentucky did, that'll leave a bad taste in my mouth. But if they lose to a really good Iowa State team and they give it and like they're slugging the whole time, I will definitely feel like it's a success. But like at this moment right now, I would say it's a success.
Yeah, and I would even add to that you are making a deep run in the tournament, making it back to the Sweet 16 without the offensive player who was producing large swaths of your success in the regular season. And so it would be really hard for me at this point, if the season ended right now, it would be hard for me to say that this season was not a success because they are doing something that is already incredibly difficult, and they're doing it handicapped right now. And other guys are stepping up in really big ways to kind of keep the season moving forward. And so it would be really hard. I mean, I think Nick's point about like if they just go and get curb stomped, I think that would be disappointing. But I think I would, even if that were the case, I think I would still say the season as a whole, is a success.
I think I'm persuaded of that. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you say that, Joe, because last week you did mention like it's about how we win or how we lose in these next few games, because I think all of us were expecting us to. I think we even predicted, right, to lose to Miami of Ohio or Virginia and not make it out of the first weekend. Obviously, Tennessee superseded that expectation. This goes back to our football debate, right? Like in 2022 football season, that season burned me, man, because I was like, I did the thing, and I had kind of always done that because I had always viewed Tennessee athletics through a purely emotional, like affectionate lens. And so like if we looked good, I expected more. If we looked bad, I expected less. That's kind of been my general practice forever. And 2022 burned me on that because that South Carolina loss made me think, you know what, I probably got too high on this team too quick and I shouldn't have done that, And obviously all the stuff with South Carolina cheating, that impacts that a little bit looking back. But in the moment, that win hurt me almost as deep as that loss hurt me almost as deep as any Tennessee loss ever had. And so when I think about basketball this year, I would have said before the season, if you don't make the Elite Eight, it's a failure, period. Like that was my expectation for the season. But if I allow myself to, let my emotions dictate a little bit, let what my eyes are telling me dictate a little bit throughout the season, then I would have said this team making the second weekend is a huge accomplishment for this team, is a success for this team. And so, I kind of have two different answers, I guess. If you're making me stick to what I said preseason, no, they have to win Friday for me to feel like it's a success. But if I'm allowed to kind of change based on what I see and what I feel throughout the season, then I think no matter what, frankly, like even if we lose by 20, I would feel good about what this team has done getting through the first weekend personally.
Yeah. I think so too. And basketball is really hard as well because you have this in every sport, but like in basketball particularly, matchups just matter and the kind of team that you're playing really matters. And so like you can be a really good team and run into a buzzsaw in the second round of a team that just you don't match up with. And you can legitimately think if we'd have been in that bracket, we might have made the Elite Eight, even though we got in the second round. Like when we got put out by Purdue in the Elite Eight, I feel like we'd have beaten most of the other teams that year. Like it was a real bummer to get matched up against them because they just played to like our weaknesses and we still fought with everything and almost won that basketball game. Yeah. And so like, that was probably our best chance. That was probably our best team that could have made a Final Four. And so like, it's one of those things where like Iowa State, which I know we're going to talk about the game and maybe this is a good way to transition, but like Iowa State thrives on turning people over. And that's kind of one of our weaknesses. So I think there is a scenario where we maybe don't get maybe a 20 like Kentucky, but where we do end up kind of being handled a little bit because we turn the ball over to them more than we should. So in that one particular way, they actually play a lot like us in a lot of ways. But in that way, it's possible that like that's kind of a little bit of a matchup disadvantage. And so, it's like you said, I don't think it's like the end of the world because you ran into a team that has a strength that matches up to one of your weaknesses and they exploit that.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I do think that's a good segue. So yeah, Nick, you already said, but Iowa State's is a really tough defensive team. I fully expect them to really put a lot of physical play on Nate Ament and make him work hard, which I think if Nate can persevere and play tough, I think that can help us because like I said earlier, I think if Nate can draw fouls and kind of take advantage of them trying to be physical with him and get to the line and knock down his free throws, I think Tennessee can at a bare minimum keep that game close, keep it where you're in striking distance to win late in that game if we can hit our free throws. Specifically, Nate can hit his free throws because he's going to be drawing fouls. But I think this game is going to be one of those grinded out physical games, which usually a Rick Barnes team thrives in. And so there's a part of me that's like confident about that, but there's also a part of me that's like, maybe they're just tougher than us. And maybe because Nate's hurt, we just don't have enough to get through that game.
But their best players hurt too.
Yes. So that was the next thing is, so Joshua Jefferson is a power forward for Iowa State, their best player. He rolled his ankle in their was it against Kentucky or their round of 64 game?
It was first round. It was first round.
Okay.
He did not play against Kentucky.
Right. And so
he was in a boot on a scooter, putting no pressure on it against Kentucky.
Right. So game time decision is what their coach is saying, which if I'm the coach of Iowa State, if I knew for sure he wasn't going to play, I would say he's a game time decision.
Yeah, no matter what, that's what you'd be saying.
No matter what, that's what I'd be saying. If I had some hope that he would play, I would be saying he's a game time decision. So right. I don't think it tells you anything other than like if Nate's not 100%, there's no way this guy's going to be 100%. And so where that leaves me is I want to see us take advantage of the fact that one of their big down low guys is out, and I want to see JP and Felix and Jalen get in there and play nasty down low and kind of set the tone for the physicality of that game. And don't let Iowa State dictate the physicality to you. They need to set that tone down low early in the game, I think.
No, I totally agree. I think you take it to them inside and beat them up a little bit, and then that should open up some shots on the outside for Jacoby and for Bishop. And so I totally agree. I think that even though he's hurt, like to your point about Nate, I think he could be like the X factor in this game. Like, can you get enough from him to make everything else work? I think he's probably the key to the game. Like, how good can he be?
And again, I think you have at least reason to be hopeful, because it seemed like by the end of the Virginia game, he was starting to kind of kick it in gear. I would definitely not say he was 100% the way he was back in the regular season, but if he can kind of build on that and carry that over into Virginia, I think, to Iowa State, I think that we definitely can win the game. So,
Yeah. So one thing we didn't mention about the Virginia game, which I think applies to the Iowa State game, so that's why I want to kind of go back to that and bring it up for this game, is late in the game against Virginia, we got kind of into that thing again that we did in the regular season where we're turning the ball over late in like leverage situations, and that's why that game was as close as it was. Now it ended up being a 7-point win, so it's like in basketball terms, like that's not like crazy close. But like, that's a game you win at the free throw line. Like if I see a final score of 7-point difference, I'm saying, okay, this team had the lead and they won at the free throw line, right? That's what that tells me as a basketball guy. And so I was encouraged that we hit enough free throws, and Jacoby really is the one that carried us late in the game at the free throw line. But I was encouraged we hit enough free throws to win. But again, the dang turnovers late in the game, I think if you turn the ball over like that against Iowa State, you're in trouble. Yep. Like they can beat you in a way that Virginia, who, of course, could have beaten us if we had done a few more things wrong, they can beat you and expose you with those turnovers more than Virginia can.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, Mac, I think it's true that there at the end of the game, we had 7 offensive possessions and 5 turnovers there towards the end, which if I remember correctly, doubled our total turnover rate for the whole game. It was like I think it was like 62% of our turnovers in the whole game happened in the last 4 minutes. It was something crazy like that. The numbers may be a little wrong there, but it was late in the game. They just couldn't get it together. They just went to pieces. And I agree. That's a recipe for disaster. No matter who you're playing, we survive Virginia. Don't think you survive Iowa State that way.
No, not at all. Well, guys, it's come down to that time. Will we win this game? Will the Tennessee Volunteers go back to the Elite Eight for the first time since Dalton Knecht was wearing a Tennessee uniform? Okay. Joe's calling timeout. Joe, what's up?
So here's the deal. If we say yes, right? We've been saying no the whole time. Do we, attempt to incur the wrath of fate from high atop of the thing by changing our mantra? Is that something that we're willing to risk here? I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious. You know what I'm saying? I'm just throwing it out there before we say anything. Before we say, just consider we've been doing it, and now here we are, and I just want you to think about it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Joe's laid it out there. So, Joe, why don't you go ahead? Will we win this game? Yes or no? And you can elaborate, but yes or no is the lead.
I think that. Oh gosh, I think this is a close one. I think matchup wise, it's a close one. I'm going to say, with everything that I just said in mind, I think the Vols win because of Joshua Jefferson not playing. I think that Joshua Jefferson is not going to play. I think that Tennessee's going to capitalize on that. I already said earlier in the podcast, I think Nate is getting back into his swing. Jacoby's playing at a high level. Bishop has shown him that he can hit three in clutch situations. And, of course, we know what our bigs can do. So I think that Tennessee wins the game.
Nick?
Before I make my prediction, one thing you said going back to the Elite Eight for the first time since Dalton Connect win. Did we not go back-to-back with Chaz last year? Did we not lose to Houston in the Elite Eight last year? I mean, we got boat raced.
You're right. We might have gone to the Elite Eight. I can't remember if that was Sweet 16 or Elite Eight.
I think it was the Elite Eight. Who
did we beat in the Sweet 16?
Kentucky?
Yes, you're right. So my apologies, listener. This would be the third straight Elite Eight for Tennessee basketball. Yes, that's right.
Let me say, it will be the third straight Elite Eight because the Vols are going to win 68-64 in a grinded-out game.
Wow.
A score prediction.
A score and everything.
A score prediction is bold.
Put it on the table, Nicholas. My goodness. That's got me fired up. You boys saying yes got me fired up.
It's happening, baby.
Boys, Tennessee's going to lose this game. I have to tell you that. Tennessee's going to lose this game. I don't think that Nate's going to be obviously not 100%. I think he's going to be worse than he was last weekend. I think that Iowa State's going to bully him a little bit and expose his youth. I think that it's going to be close. I think Tennessee will play tough. I think I'm going to walk away happy and proud of how the team finished the season. But I do think Tennessee's going to lose. I do have something I want to put on the radar for everybody involved in the gambling world. So FanDuel has been offering this promotion every kind of round of the tournament, and they give you a bet where if you place a money line bet on a team, even if they lose, as long as they go up by 10 points at some point in the game, you win your bet. So if the team, if the team wins, you win, or if they go up by 10 and lose, you win. I think that's worth a look in this game because, as this season would tell us, Tennessee, if they get a 10-point lead, is going to lose the game. We know this to be true. I think that Tennessee money line is worth a strong look for anyone that's interested in gambling on FanDuel because I do believe Tennessee can get a 10-point lead in this game and find a way to lose, and I do think they can win if they play great. So that's worth a look, but I've got Tennessee losing that game. Would not be surprised if we give it up late with turnovers and, dumb play at the end of the game. So
yeah. Also wouldn't be shocked, but I think we're gonna put it all together. I think we're gonna get over the hump.
Hey, I would love that. All right, so moving on to baseball.
Do you want to put hot wings on it? You versus me, win lose.
Yeah, you versus me. So if we win,
yeah. So if we win, you. Yeah, can't hold me to my score prediction for this, but Tennessee wins. No. Tennessee wins straight up. You eat hot wings. Iowa State wins. I eat hot wings.
Yeah, deal.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Perfect. It's done. Dude, you weren't here last week, Nick, but Jeff was trying to pressure me and eat hot wings, and he was not willing to put any skin in the game. So I'm willing to
I listened. That was absurd.
I'm willing to take this bet for the sheer.
If you're listening to this, Pastor, that was weak, brother. I can't believe it. Couldn't believe it. This man just didn't want indigestion. Couldn't handle it.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you know that you're past 40 is when you start doing stuff like that. I mean, my goodness.
Boys, I can be eating hot wings now. I have to sleep. I have sleep for 2 days.
But I'm going to say yes. And honestly, I hope I'm the one eating wings.
Me
just
too.
Out of the sheer sportsmanship of you offering to take a punishment, I'm willing to play ball. So let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right.
I'll just say I don't feel confident enough in anything in this game to put any kind of hot wings bet on it. So glad you guys are feeling confident enough to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, it's a win-win for me. That's how I'm looking at it. It's
That's
a win-win.
That's true.
If I eat wings, I'm happy. If
It's
I
like
don't eat
it's
wings,
like double
I'm
or
right.
nothing. It's like double or nothing for me. Like Vols are
Exactly.
losing, and I'm crying from the heat.
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
I'll be literally and figuratively crying. But if we win, it's gonna be like going to Disney World.
It's going to be a sweet victory for you, my friend. And I'll be happy for you, in pain, but I'll be happy. All right, so Tennessee baseball. Tennessee wins their weekend series against Mizzou 2-1. We took games 2 and 3 Saturday and Sunday. Guys, we don't have to get into obviously get into whatever you feel led to, but I want to really start with losing on Friday and winning the next two is obviously not what anyone had in their mind for this series. So my first question is, let's just specifically talk about Friday and specifically talk about Tegan Kuntz. Like, what was up with Tegan in that game? Is this a sign of something? Is this just a one-off? Like, what was going on? Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, my faith in Kuntz has been shaken here in the last 2 weekends of Tennessee baseball. I'm hoping that it's a kind of a slump, kind of a pitching slump, that he can figure it out, and that he can get to the level that we need him to play at in SEC play. But I think this could be another situation where we were high on a guy that actually isn't as good as we thought. I think that's legitimately on the table at this point.
Yeah. So I'll jump in. I agree. I felt like this was going to be a clear bounce back week.
Yep.
Georgia's tough. They hit the ball well. Okay. He gave up 5 or 6 against them. I felt like he would really come out locked in. And I was pretty shocked at the way he got tagged. And I was like, the end of game 1 of this series is the most down that I've been about Tennessee baseball so far this year. Like, I was ready to be like, oh my gosh, we're not going to win a darn series all year because this Missouri team is so beatable. And so happy to see him bounce back, but I am concerned about Kuntz. I don't know. I'm having a hard time regulating my emotions. Like, I was very upset at the end of game 1. So I don't know to what level I'm concerned because I'm still pretty upset about it. Like, I don't know that I can think super rationally about it, honestly, but because there was a lot of battered Vol syndrome coming up during that outing. So, I mean, Kuntz has the stuff. To me, there's hopefully something mechanical that they can help him fix, or it's in his head, which is honestly a worse thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? It's like pitching is such a mental thing. And we know that there's the greatest MLB pitchers. Like, you think about guys in our lifetime, you think about a guy like Justin Verlander, right? Who is a guy who, and one of our good friends is a Dodgers fan, like Clayton Kershaw is in the conversation of one of the greatest pitchers.
I would call him a good friend.
a friend of sorts. He, Clayton Kershaw, everyone has that thing where it's like, he's just not good in the playoffs, right? Which I'm actually sympathetic to. I think that's actually a little bit of an overblown narrative. I actually think he's not as bad in the playoffs as people think. That's that point aside. I don't want to get into MLB. The point here that I'm trying to make about Kuntz, though, is that the best pitchers in baseball are the guys who can just flip the switch and not let a bad outing dictate the next one or the next two or however many. This is, to me, even though Kuntz maybe hasn't looked as sharp against Georgia or however far you want to go back, if you've seen some things you didn't like, to me this weekend, Friday night against Vanderbilt, is going to tell you what type of guy Tegan Kuntz is. And I mean, I'm ready to say if he doesn't pitch well on Friday, is it worth mixing up the rotation on the weekends? It
I
might
think
be.
so. I think so.
And so
I would go so far as to say you have to. I mean, the team is still trying to find its swagger, its identity. You've got a new skip in Josh Elander. You've got a lot of young guys that he's brought in. You've got to the team has shown itself to be talented enough that they can win baseball games. So this isn't like straight rebuilding year kind of scenario where it's like, well, we're just trying to kind of rediscover our identity and start to build from the ground up. They've got a lot of pieces in place already, and there's too much talent in the bats to just totally write off the season. And so if he comes out and lays another egg on Friday, am I being too harsh?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you're looking at a Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, this is similar to what we did with Chase Burns, right?
Yes.
That's what this feels like, a Chase Burns situation to me. Like, I think you bring him out of the pen. I mean, Appenzeller looked great. Like, maybe you bump everybody up. Maybe he becomes your Saturday. Maybe he becomes your Saturday guy. I don't know. And try that for a weekend or two, and bring him out of the pen and see if he feels better. Like, bring him in when we have a lead. See if he's more comfortable and can get some confidence back if he pitches poorly against Vanderbilt.
Yeah. And I do think that's an interesting thing, right? Maybe you start – and I'm very concerned. I know you're just kind of spitballing ideas, but I'm very concerned with the thought of Landon Mack throwing on Friday night. Sure. Landon Mack has shown that he's a pitch-to-contact guy. He gives up a lot of hits. He gets out of jams. Against Vanderbilt, you're going to lose if you're giving up 9-10 hits. Do
you let Blanco throw on Friday?
So that's what I was going to say. I think Blanco, to me – now, the Georgia game is an outlier, which obviously that's the only SEC series we have.
He looked great this last weekend.
But he looked great. And I there's a part of me that thinks Blanco is the most polished guy in your starting rotation. And obviously, he's also the most experienced guy. He's pitched ACC level baseball. So I think if you're
more stable here.
Right. I think if you're saying we know we want these three guys to start, we just might need to change Coons. Then, I think I would go Blanco Friday, keep Mack on Saturday, and throw Coons on Sunday. Now, I do think what you brought up is more interesting to me. And if I was in Elander's shoes, let's just assume Coons has a similar outing as against Missouri against Vanderbilt. I think what I'm most interested in is, do you start Appenzeller and then bring Coons in, like you said, and just flip those two on Friday? That is really interesting to me. And so I think if I was making the decision, assuming another bad outing happens for Coons, I think that's the route I would go, because there's also like Drew Beam pitched for 4 years at Tennessee, and he always pitched on Sunday, even when he was the best pitcher on the roster. And it's because Drew Beam really likes Sunday. And he pitched well on Sunday. If it's not broke, don't fix it, right? And so if Blanco's throwing well on Sunday, I'm scared at moving him out of that spot to Friday.
I agree. That's concerning. And man, Appenzeller came in, bases juice, no outs, and was just cool as a cucumber. And he gave you what, like 7 1/3, 7 2/3, something like that.
He was dealing.
He looked like what we had hoped he would look like. And so to me, if he is mentally tough in that way, like he really showed me something, then like throw him out there on Friday. If he gets in trouble, you can bring in Coons, and maybe he gives you a lead. If he gives you 5-6, then you can bring in Coons and still let him have 3, 4, 5 innings. I think that's something that I would consider if I were the coach. But
it was really fun for me, not just because Appenzeller looked great, but it was fun for me as a baseball fan to watch a relief pitcher go 7 innings.
Oh, that's
because
awesome.
like that's just something that's like lost on modern baseball.
Yep.
Like growing up, we had the long relief guys, and the guys that would come in for a good 4 or 5 good chunk of innings, and managers let them ride. And now baseball is so analytical driven that you've got relief pitchers that throw to 1 batter, 2 batters.
You're throwing 5-6 guys a game, and the next night you're throwing the same 5-6 guys.
Exactly. So it was just cool to see like a guy come in and be a traditional like long relief guy. And if he's got that in the tank, he can start. I mean, as simple as that. Like if he's got that in the tank, he can start. Even if he only goes 3 innings, you can bring in Coons at that point. So
I mean, he just threw 7. So like, what I
Right.
mean, what are we talking about? Like,
Right.
if he could throw 7, that's a starter. I mean,
That's a starter.
yeah, it was awesome. I agree. It's why college baseball is like, I mean, probably also I'm biased just because, I have watched college baseball off and on for most of my life. My dad always liked to watch it. But, when I was a kid, Tennessee had some good seasons. The Tony Delmonico years were
Mm-hmm.
kind of a lot of my, the first baseball at Tennessee that I remember. And so we had some good seasons, went to Omaha. And, you know, it, but college baseball has become for me like what baseball should be. Like it's still like I still like Major League Baseball. Obviously, like Mac's a Yankees fan. I'm a Braves fan. I don't know if you could tell Mac's a Yankees fan. It's opening day.
That's right.
Yanks are 1-0. And
Going to be 7-0 in the seventh.
okay, 7-0 in the seventh. Forgive me. Going to be 1-0. They're playing Tony Vitello, right?
That's right. That's right.
Oh man. Okay. Tough start for Tony. Tough look. Tough look for Tony. Tough look in the mirror. The Braves are going to suck. Anyways, should have got a starting pitcher. Didn't. We're not here to talk about that. Anyways, it's just become, like you said, with the analytics and everything, it feels like college baseball is more like the heart of what baseball has always been. More than like the majors. You know, the way we probably felt about our major league teams in the 90s are like the way that I feel about college baseball now. Like you're never going to see a guy come in, throw 7 innings in Major League Baseball. Like it's just not going to happen, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So guys, next
How can
question.
you not be romantic about baseball?
How can you not? One of the greatest quotes of all time. So did winning in this way, losing on Friday, this team bouncing back and winning on Saturday and Sunday, I mean, relatively convincingly, especially on Sunday, did that prove anything to you about this team? Like, does this team have more maybe fight in them than you thought? Is the hitting better than you thought? Where does that leave you, Joe? Go ahead.
Well, the one positive with Tennessee hitting is that they seem to have really improved in their 2-out rally hitting. I think that was even true in the midweek game against SC Upstate. They had a hard time converting those 2-out hits into actual runs. It was actually the baseball team had a similar problem against SC Upstate that the basketball team has had pretty consistently all year, which is like you're doing all these things well, but you just can't score. But still, what I think the Missouri weekend, and then of course coming back and beating a bad team in SC State shows is that if you just consistently do the good baseball, maybe more than any other sport, it is true that if you just consistently do the right things and do them well, you're gonna win. Mm-hmm. Like it really is predictable in that way. Much more so than football and basketball are. So I think that's a real positive takeaway from this past weekend and then through the midweek is that the bats are active even when you got 2 outs. I think we're still grounding into too many double plays. The base running is always seems to always consistently be a problem for us. So
Jay Abernathy, if you hear this, run the freaking base path, son. You know how fast you are. What in the world are you doing standing on second on a fly ball in right field?
And going not just you mean you just said it right.
It's pitiful. It's pitiful.
I've never played a moment of organized institutional baseball in my life, and I know that when the ball is hit deep, you kind of take 4 or 5 steps and you're watching, waiting. Does it fall? Okay, now I take off. If not, you're definitely going to get back to second before he throws it in.
He should have been 3/4 of the way there. There's no chance they're throwing him out of second.
Why are you standing on the bag? It just
unbelievable.
It makes no sense. So there's stuff like that I think is still I don't understand it at this level. Like, how are you making these kinds of mistakes at this level?
They've won 3 out of their last 4, and there's clearly ways to improve. So I think that's a good sign.
It's all good signs. But again, to get back to the original point here, two out rallies in baseball will make you or break you. And Tennessee has shown pretty consistently over the last 4 or 5 games that they can get 2 out rallies going. They even had a good one against Georgia. So I think that's a real positive.
Yeah, I'm definitely encouraged because when they lost that Friday night game, I thought they were getting swept.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that they didn't hang their head, I've been really worried that there's no dogs on this team and that they don't have grit. And they didn't hang their head. They came out and hit. I was kind of bummed watching the USC upstart they got to be called upstart because that's just low hanging fruit. But watching South Carolina upstart, I was like pretty concerned watching that game. But it makes sense to me that after winning a big SEC series, I mean, I know it's Missouri, but they hadn't won at home series in a while, and so they won that series. That they would come out sluggish, and they kind of played with their food for like 8 innings, 7 innings, and then found a way to win that game. Had a big walk off. So the fact that they have that, it felt like they had that switch that they flipped a little bit there the other night. So I definitely feel better after this weekend than I did going into the weekend. I'm not saying that they're going to like go to Omaha now, but I feel a lot better about, them winning some series this year. Boys, on Friday night, I was like, they're not going to win a series. They're not going to win an SEC series.
It was dark.
So,
it was dark.
Well, to own my own prediction, right? I had said that we would win Friday and Saturday and lose Sunday. And I don't remember if I said this on the podcast or not, but I was definitely of the mindset of if we lose Friday, we're not going to win at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wasn't
on the pod, but I was definitely feeling that they would win 2 out of 3, but there's no chance that I thought they'd win 2 out of 3 without Friday.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think we would. I mean, yeah, I agree with all that, and I also would have said you're crazy if you think we're going to lose Friday, right? Mm-hmm. Like right. I thought Friday was basically a lock. I mean, I believe in Tegan Kuhns. Like I really feel like he's a good player, and that we should win every time he's on the mound. I felt that way about Liam Doyle. I felt that way about Chase Burns before his catastrophe in 2023. I felt that way. I mean,
Dolander.
Chase Dolander, like all our Friday night guys, basically since Tony Vitello took over.
It's just a given.
It's just you're going to win on Fridays. It's just what can you do in the other 2 games? And I was impressed with the team as a whole that they were able to overcome a Friday night loss early in the season when winning the series is the most important thing. I think it stands to potentially inspire this team and show them that they can win in different ways, mm-hmm. in a way that winning Friday and Saturday and losing Sunday would have maybe not proven that to you as much.
You grow when you go through that kind of adversity and you figure out a way to overcome. So
absolutely,
in the long run, this could have been the best thing to happen to them. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. So, Nick, you brought up the SC upstart. I'll take your thing there.
Thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate
that. You talked about that game. So the only real question I had about that game, because obviously for the majority of it, it's pretty uneventful, was it sad to have to win a midweek game even after the weekend? Nick, I think you made a good point about it kind of natural being like an emotionally down game. But was it sad to have to win in a walk-off fashion against a team like that? Or are you kind of more like a win's a win? I'm just glad we got it. Joe, you go first.
Well, my position always is that a win is a win. But I think those two are not necessarily diametrically opposed. And so the fact that you had to walk it off against SC Upstart, I think is not great. And I'll actually comment on, the listener probably has picked up on this by now, but I'm a big fan of small ball baseball play, maybe more so than some of the other guys that are on the podcast. But yeah,
we all like, we all like a good bunt every now and then.
But what are you doing giving away a bunt in the bottom of the 9th?
Yeah, it was bad.
Right. You're just giving an out away. It's situation. Again, I know I harp on this stuff all the time, but it's not about the stats for me as much as it is about the situation. And that's in that situation, that bunting is absolutely the wrong call. And so this is a bigger picture problem for me that the Elander and the staff, they're making these choices that I don't understand. I won't say I'm a baseball aficionado or anything, but I love the game. Been watching it my whole life, and I just think bunting in that you're at home, bottom of the 9th, you're playing a team that you should be dog walking. Why are you not swinging the bat? There's things like that are really concerning to me that are not necessarily the players, but the coaching staff and decisions they're making. Of course, we talked about mismanaging the bullpen with Georgia. So we won't have to reharp all of that, but I think it's a win is a win. That should be, sort of the bottom line, but I'm disappointed in the way that it happened. And again, some of these decisions that were made, I think we have to play better and make better decisions in key moments if you're gonna try to make a run back to Omaha, which I don't know if this team is capable of, but that should be the goal.
Yeah, I was pretty down on that game even after we won. I mean, I think I said something like, "I'll take it," of course, because a win's a win. In hindsight, I do think that things like the bunting and the bad base running by Abernathy are the biggest negatives. I actually feel a lot more positive about that game from the sense that I kind of mentioned earlier, that it makes sense to me that they would be hung over against a much far inferior opponent after a big emotional SEC win. And so to me, I'm actually pretty encouraged by the fact that they were able to flip a switch when they need to and just they were down 1-0 for a long time. They were able to flip a switch and get 2 runs, got a big hit, scored 2. And then the fact that, Grimmer was able to hit that walk-off, like somebody's got some dog in them. They could go up to the plate and get a hit when they needed to get a hit. And so I think overall I'm more encouraged than discouraged by that game. Whereas in the heat of that moment, it was pretty frustrating and I was more discouraged. So I'm looking back on it more favorably than I was, a couple nights ago. Or last night.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, midweek games are just midweek games. Like you're gonna drop some if you're not on your best game, because you're getting every team's best shot, right? SC Upstart, they are coming in here to give you your best shot. When you play Tennessee Tech, when you play ETSU, whoever you play in the midweek, they're bringing their best, and obviously not on the mound, but they're bringing their best in terms of focus, in terms
their
of
mindset,
their mindset, yeah, right, all those things. And so the final score is not what bothers me. It's, if anything, it's just really like you said, Joe, it's the situational baseball. It's the decision making. It's the lack of execution at the plate, the lack of approach. And these are just things that we've talked about all season. But at some point, you've just got to get into a mindset of, in the words of Josh Heupel, nameless, faceless opponent. I don't care who I'm playing. I'm going to go to the plate with a good approach, and I'm going to make every at bat count. I'm going to see pitches. I'm going to swing at strikes. I'm going to take balls. I'm going to make a pitcher work for it. I just want this team to do the right things. And if you lose, you lose. It's okay. If you lose, if you drop a midweek game because you face a mid-major team that's really good hitting this year, and you weren't expecting it. Okay, it is what it is. But you just got to start doing the baseball technical things right, no matter who you're playing against. And that's where I want to see this team grow. The wins and losses are going to sort themselves out. I just want to see this team play better baseball when they're on the field and actually look like they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agree. Hard to argue that.
Do you have any? Is there any meat to Ford not playing? A guy like that, who's clear. Nick, you had said who's the dog on the team. I don't know that this team has one necessarily, but Ford has been a pretty consistent bat.
My guy Garrett Wright, got some dog in him.
An absolutely fair point. But is Ford not being in the lineup, does a guy like that not being there, can that excuse some of the things that we're talking about, or is against a team SC Upstart?
I think
does it not matter?
Yeah, I think it. Obviously, anytime Henry Ford doesn't play, it's not, you're a worse baseball team than you would be otherwise. But it's a SC Upstart. Everybody should be hitting. Everybody should be, if everybody's not getting on base, everybody should be barreling the baseball at some point in the game. And so, yeah, I mean, those midweek games are just often about who's hitting better that day, because no one's seeing their best pitching, either team, on those games. So it's just like Max said, it's about those games are about approach at the plate, who's going to be disciplined and wait for good pitches and not swing at junk. And that Henry Ford not being out there should not affect that.
Yeah. I think one thing that is true about Tennessee baseball as a culture, and I think this is a negative overall, even under Tony V, is that when you are a team that plays with emotion, high emotion, and you're playing, with that edge, which I love all those things. What it can lead to is a form of hero ball, right? And so,
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was. I feel like it was maybe Stone, but I can't remember exactly. Somebody came up in the seventh, and we had runners on second and third with one out, and you struck out. And that's just like basic baseball. You just can't strike out. You
Yep.
can't strike out.
Yep.
That's the situation
Put
where
the ball between the mayonnaise.
if you want to bunt, okay. Like I don't love a squeeze type play, runner on third, like because you should be able to get a sac fly. You should be able to poke the ball on the ground to the second baseman and score a run. Like I don't like bunting in those situations, but even that would at least be explainable. Striking out on a breaking ball in the dirt is just completely inexcusable.
Yep.
I would get on to a 7-year-old in their first coaches pitch league if they're striking out like that. And or first kids pitch league, sorry, if they're striking out like that. And it's just you can't do it. You just can't do that and expect to
That's
win
fundamental
games.
baseball. It's like you said, it's fundamental baseball, and you gotta play the fundamentals.
Yeah, it's just they've got to figure that stuff out, especially this weekend. So looking ahead, Tennessee travels down I-40 West to play at Vanderbilt. Obviously, in-state rival. No love lost for the Commodores, especially the baseball team.
Especially the Vandy boys.
Yeah, ridiculous. The gayest thing in college baseball by far. So all three games this weekend will be televised, which is awesome. So I do think that Sunday could potentially be like a flex game, like if Tennessee wins both or Vanderbilt wins the first two, and especially if they're lopsided one way or the other, I think you could see that Sunday game get bounced off network television. But Friday night, we play on ESPNU at 7 p.m. Central Time. Saturday, we play at 1 p.m. Central Time on SEC Network. And Sunday, we play at 11 a.m. Central Time, ESPN2. So fun when Tennessee baseball is on live TV. Actually, network television is always fun. So, guys, looking ahead, what do you expect for this team this weekend? Nick, you go first.
I expect them to play with the heart and grit, even more so against Vanderbilt than they played with against Missouri. So I think they have a chance to win this series. They've got to be mentally tough. I am really curious about Coons. That's a huge question mark for me on this whole series. I definitely don't think you can lose to Vanderbilt on Friday and expect to win the series like you can against Missouri.
Yep. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt's obviously a really great program. They play really good baseball fundamentally year in and year out. They're an in-state rival. They would love nothing better than to beat us. And it's on the road. So you're not getting the home half in the bottom of the ninth. So, I think there's a lot to be to be positive about with Tennessee baseball. The way that they responded last weekend. Is that enough to say that they're going to walk out of here with a series win? Maybe not. I'm not as convinced. The relief pitching has shown that it's still able to get rocked. Obviously, there's a big question mark with Coons. We've already discussed that, and Tennessee, their ability to ground into the double play here recently has shown itself to be exponentially greater than what you'd hope for. And double plays just kill offensive production in innings. And so, and Vanderbilt's going to turn the ball. I mean, they're not going to, if those close plays where you're just trying to leg it out, they're going to get it to the bag. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'm cautious. I guess I would describe my attitude towards this series as cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. I would say expectations for me going into this weekend are I expect Tennessee to have better approaches when it comes to, you're going to have your best nine or as close the best nine right now, let's say, in the lineup. I expect the approach to be better. I do think Tennessee is going to keep these games close. I think they're going to score some runs. Obviously, the linchpin, the hinge point, whatever you want to call it, on the whole series is what does Coons look like on Friday? Can you get that game? And then can you survive one of the next two? And so if you get the game Friday and Coons looks good, you're going to feel really good about the weekend. And, you like your chances to get one more. You guys have already said that. So my expectations at least are we look a little bit more put together at the plate. Whether production happens or not, that's situational. But I do think Tennessee is going to have a better approach. I think they're going to be ready to play. It's just what can you get out of Coons on Friday? I think that's going to set the tone. Before we give our predictions for this series, one thing that we didn't talk about, which I think needs to be talked about, and I meant to bring this up earlier, so that's why I want to go back to it, is are you guys aware of the antics, let's call them, that Coons was involved in on Friday night against Missouri last weekend? Have you heard about this?
No, not at all.
So apparently, after the first inning on Friday, Coons goes 3 up, 3 down, looks really sharp coming out against Missouri in that first inning. He was. This is according to Will Heflin, who was calling the game on Vol Network with John. Please help me, Nick. Thank you, John Wilkerson, and Will Heflin said that Coons was throwing about 97, 98 in the top of the first inning against Missouri. He comes out in the second inning, and this is right before he starts giving up hits and giving up runs, and he's throwing like 93 in the second inning. So you got like a 4 or 5 mile an hour drop off.
That's not good.
Between this second inning, and apparently Will Heflin says that Tegan Coons was like blowing kisses and things towards the Missouri dugout after the first inning. And then he comes out and just gets absolutely tagged in the second inning. So I just wanted to, before we wrap up, I want to go back and ask about that, because as two guys that didn't hear it or didn't see it, what do you think about that? Like, obviously we like the way that Tennessee plays with fire, but to me, blowing kisses at the opponent after one inning,
after the first inning.
Yeah, that to me is a little different than like a guy getting fired up after a big hit.
Yeah. Coons hasn't earned that, I would say.
Right.
And hasn't shown he's mentally tough enough to do something like that. And honestly, like, even if you're the starting pitcher on Friday night, like, you have to stay locked in. You're setting the tone for this team. And so, if you're up 7-2 and you're coming out of the ball game in the 6th or 7th, and you want to blow him a good night kiss, like, that's much more tolerable than at the end of the first inning, just because you sat down their first 3 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do not like that.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't wake people up, right? I mean, you got to let the play speak for itself, and understatement is the super K of wit. So let's not be counting our chickens here a little too early. And like Nick said, I mean, Coons has not exactly been lights out. I mean, we're literally on this podcast talking about should we shake up the lineup. So yeah, it's a bad look and totally different than jacking one, thinking that you've got the go ahead run.
Totally different.
And it gets robbed from you. That's a totally different thing.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I just to use a more recent counterexample. So yeah, not a fan of that. Hopefully he matures and learns from it and doesn't do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I said this, but as we kind of agreed on the podcast a couple weeks ago, or actually it was last week, I guess, because we were talking about the Stone situation that Joe brought up. This weekend shows, like, if Tegan's going to be that guy, like, you better be blowing kisses if you look sharp against Vanderbilt, because I don't want to see a dude that's going to act like that and then like back off and be a coward because it came back to bite him. Now, there's obviously you can learn from it and say, yeah, that's not the kind of player I want to be. I'm not going to do that moving forwards. But that needs to be like a internal, like, repentant kind of view on how I play the game, and not like I got made look like an idiot, so I'm gonna kind of cater to the pressure and say, well, I'm not gonna do that anymore because I don't want to look like an idiot,
Right?
Like,
yeah, I want him to play with that kind of an edge, but if doing something like that is gonna knock him mentally out of whatever mental state he was in that allowed him to go 3 up, 3 down, if that's going to affect him, then he just needs to go to the dugout and stay locked in.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
keep
absolutely.
that edge, but you can't come back out of the you can't come out of the dugout and lose 5 miles an hour on your fastball and get tagged and beaten off the mound. Like that's
Yeah,
just win, brother.
yeah, that's a tough look for sure. All right, well, let's get into our predictions, and then we'll wrap up. So, guys, predictions this weekend. We've kind of laid out our expectations. What do you expect to see? What do you actually think is going to happen? What are you walking away with this weekend? Nick, why don't you go first?
This one's really tough for me because Vandy obviously is traditionally really good. Mississippi State made them look really bad this last weekend, but they
Mm-hmm.
also blew the doors off of LSU the week before. You know, I I believe that this week, I think we're going to actually score some runs. I think this comes down to does our pitching hold them down a bit, and I'm just going to go. I think this all hinges on Coons and Friday night, and I'm just going to go with that he's going to bounce back and that we're going to win Friday. I'm going to say we're going to win Friday, lose Saturday, and win a rubber match on Sunday.
Nice. Joe?
Well, Nick, if I piggyback off of you,
Good. It's a good take.
That's where I eat. Against Mississippi State, they scored 2 in the Friday game, 2 in the Saturday game. They did score 7, but they got run ruled because they gave up 17. They did blow the absolute brakes off of Tennessee Tech. Bad baseball team. Although actually Tennessee Tech plays pretty good baseball, so that's not when you're talking about midweek game, that's not terrible. But it seems like against quality opponents, they scored 1 against Indiana. They did put up a lot of runs against LSU, but that's 2 weeks ago. If the bats are cold and stay cold, I think Tennessee absolutely wins the weekend. And because I hate Vanderbilt, I'm going to say that is the continuing trend for the Vanderbilt Commodores, that the bats are going to be lead weight in their hands and that Tennessee pitching is going to be able to handle it. So I'm going to say give me Friday and Saturday. Sunday's a wash. We win the series 2-1.
Okay. Yeah, this is a tough one. Obviously, it could go either way. I think you're going to come down to a couple pitches, a couple plays that are going to decide this. If Tennessee doesn't just play smart baseball and put the ball in play when runners are on, if pitchers aren't executing their pitches and leaving stuff over the plate, I think any of those things, obviously, just like in any baseball game, that's not breaking news, are going to dictate how the weekend goes. But I'll say I think just based on what I've seen and what I feel. I think I feel most confident Evan Blanco. Vanderbilt has shown that they struggle on Sundays to a certain extent. I feel like Tennessee's going to score runs. Evan Blanco is going to pitch well on Sunday because I think that might be the only win you get. So I think I'm going to go Coons. I think is probably a little bit better, but I still think that hitting's struggling, and he gives up just one too many, in middle innings in that Friday game. And so Tennessee loses that one. I think Saturday Vanderbilt will close us out because Landon Mack's going to give up 10 hits, and I just think he really needs to cut down on the. I don't want to say cut down on pitching to contact because I think that is a good strategy generally speaking, but you just gotta make a little bit more competitive pitches when you're ahead in the count if you're Landon Mack. So I think Tennessee's going to drop Friday, Saturday, but win the rubber match on Sunday. Would love to be wrong.
I don't think that's a bad take. I definitely think Friday's the linchpin. I feel pretty good about Sunday. So
yes.
We're just on different sides of Friday, I think. And honestly, mine's kind of just hopeful.
Yeah. No, and I respect it. I mean, I respect it, but yep. All right. So you heard it here. We'll come back next week with setting up the timeline for punishments. If Tennessee beats Iowa State, then I will be eating wings. And if Iowa State beats Tennessee, we will all be sad, and Nick will be the most sad.
True. I'll be doubly sad.
Yeah. And so
I'll be in a bad way, Vol fans.
But make sure you're tuned in and supporting your Volunteers this weekend. Big weekend for baseball and basketball. And yeah, Nick, go ahead and plug our socials, man.
Absolutely. You can find us on Spotify, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on our YouTube channel. And we are at volatile_1998 on X. So make sure to tell your friends. We're hoping that we're not all incredibly sad next week, but this is Tennessee we're talking about. So chances are you're going to need us this time next week. So make sure to tell your friends so that we can all go through this together.
Remember, it's terminal.